They called it a compliance demonstration. 200 innocent human children executed in cold blood by the Galactic Empire. The galaxy watched in silence, but humanity did not. 8 minutes later, the Empire's first world went dark. Then the next, and the next. In those 8 minutes, something ancient awoke, something the stars had forgotten. Not vengeance, not war, but a promise. A promise whispered through every human heart. You do not harm our children and walk away. This is not a story of justice. It's the reckoning they never saw coming. The spark that lit the fire. The morning sun cast golden light across the wheat fields of New Hope Colony on Kepler 442b. Children's laughter echoed through the settlement as 200 young humans played in the school courtyard, their voices mixing with the gentle hum of farming equipment in the distance. Sarah Martinez, age 7, was showing her alien friend Zix how to make mud pies when the sky darkened. The Galactic Empire's dreadnought, Eternal Order, hung above the colony like a steel thundercloud. Its shadow fell across the playground where children still played, unaware that their innocent games were about to end forever. Commander Thex 9, a cold-blooded reptilian with scales that gleamed like black metal, stood on the bridge reviewing his orders. The humans of Kepler 442b had refused to send their children to Empire indoctrination centers. This defiance required correction. The Empire's message would be clear and final. Begin the demonstration, Thex 9 commanded, his voice emotionless as winter. The energy beam struck the school without warning. In 3 seconds, 200 human children were gone. Not wounded, not captured, simply erased from existence. The Empire's cameras recorded everything, broadcasting the execution across 9 star systems as a lesson in compliance. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen sat in her laboratory when the transmission reached her. The brilliant geneticist and former military strategist watched the footage once, then again, her hands trembling as she recognized her niece's face among the victims. The coffee mug in her grip shattered, ceramic shards cutting her palm, but she felt nothing except the cold fire building in her chest. Across human space, similar scenes played out. In Luna City, retired Admiral Jackson Cole punched through his office wall. On Mars, former intelligence operative Elena Volkov simply stared at her screen, tears freezing on her cheeks in the thin atmosphere. In the asteroid belt, Marcus Ghost Rodriguez, the man who once infiltrated a vegan fortress using nothing but duct tape and determination, slowly reached for his emergency communicator. The Empire expected riots, protests, desperate diplomatic messages. Instead, they got silence. For exactly 8 minutes, humanity said nothing at all. Then, across every human network, on every screen, in every communication device, the same message appeared. Not words, just numbers counting down from 8 o'clock. The Empire's intelligence services scrambled to decode it but found nothing, just a simple countdown that made no sense. 7:45, 7:44, 7:43. Dr. Chen stood in her basement surrounded by equipment that officially didn't exist. Her team gathered around her, people who had supposedly retired from military service years ago. There was Rodriguez, whose specialty was making impossible things possible. Volkov, who could turn an enemy's own mind against them. Cole, who understood that sometimes you had to burn everything down to save what mattered. They killed our children, Chen said quietly, her voice steady as steel. They broadcast it like entertainment. They want to teach the galaxy that human life has no value. She looked at each of her team members, seeing her own rage reflected in their eyes. 8 minutes, she continued. That's how long it took for news of the massacre to reach Earth. 8 minutes for a species to decide its response to genocide. The countdown reached 4 o'clock. Rodriguez cracked his knuckles. What's the plan, Doc? Chen smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression any of them had ever seen. We're going to teach them that human children aren't just our future. They're our line in the sand, and when someone crosses that line... 3 USA, 259, 258. We erase them from history. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Rodriguez began unpacking devices that shouldn't have existed. Volkov opened files marked with clearance levels that officially weren't possible. Cole activated communication networks that the Empire didn't know existed. Across human space, other teams received their activation codes. Scientists became saboteurs. Teachers became tacticians. Parents became something far more dangerous than soldiers. 1 o'clock. 0:59. 0:58. The Empire's monitoring stations picked up increased human communication traffic but couldn't decode any of it. Their analysts reported strange patterns in human behavior, subtle changes in routine that made no sense. 010, 009, 008. On Kepler 442b, the survivors huddled in their homes, mourning their children. They didn't know that hidden deep beneath their colony was a quantum transmitter that Chen's team had placed there years ago, just in case. 003, 002, 001. The countdown reached 0. Every screen across human space went black for exactly 1 second. Then, in simple white text on a black background, appeared the message that would haunt the Empire's dreams. You touched our children, now you learn what monsters look like when they love something. The first sign that something had changed came from the Empire's outer monitoring station at Rigel 7. The massive surveillance platform, equipped with sensors that could detect a whisper across a solar system, simply vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone, as if it had never existed. The duty officer's report to command was brief and confused. Sir, Station Rigel 7 is not there anymore. Our sensors show empty space, but that's impossible. The station had a crew of 12,000. Admiral Vex, the Empire's senior military commander, studied the reports with growing unease. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the information. Equipment malfunction. Send a repair team. The repair team found debris that told an impossible story. The station hadn't been blown up or shot down. It had been taken apart piece by piece with surgical precision. Every weapon had been removed, every data core wiped clean. The crew was gone, but their escape pods remained intact, floating empty in space. Most disturbing of all was the message painted on the station's main hull in bright yellow paint. Thanks for the toys. Love, humanity. Rodriguez floated in his stolen stealth suit among the station's remains, grinning behind his helmet. Taking apart a massive space station in 4 hours should have been impossible, but humans specialized in making impossible things routine. The Empire's technology was advanced, but it was also predictable. They built systems that followed rules. Humans, on the other hand, excelled at breaking rules. Station Rigel 7 neutralized, he reported through quantum encrypted communication. Beginning Phase 2. Phase 2 targeted the Empire's communication networks. Volkov had studied alien psychology for decades, understanding that different species responded to different fears. The cold, logical reptilians feared chaos, the hive-minded insectoids feared isolation, the proud avian warriors feared humiliation, so she gave them all 3 at once. The Empire's news broadcasts began showing strange glitches. Military reports were interrupted by footage of human children playing, laughing, learning. Command frequencies carried whispered voices speaking in human languages the Empire's translators couldn't decode. Navigation systems started playing human lullabies. But the most effective weapon was memory itself. Volkov had discovered that humans weren't the only species that cherished their young. Every alien culture had its own version of childhood, its own protective instincts. She broadcasted those memories back to them, forcing every Empire citizen to remember what it felt like to be small, vulnerable, loved. Then she showed them what they had destroyed. Panic spread through Empire space faster than their fastest ships. Commanders who had watched the Kepler 442b massacre with cold approval now woke screaming from dreams of human children calling for their parents. Soldiers who had cheered the demonstration found themselves unable to look at their own offspring without seeing Sarah Martinez's face. The Empire's response was swift and desperate. They mobilized the Third Fleet, 27 capital ships armed with enough firepower to crack a planet. Their target? Earth itself. The fleet never arrived. Admiral Cole had anticipated this move. The former Earth Navy commander understood that conventional warfare was a losing game against the Empire's superior numbers and technology. So he had prepared something unconventional. The Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, expecting to find a desperate defense. Instead, they found what appeared to be a single human freighter drifting powerless in space. "This is Admiral Krex of the Third Imperial Fleet," the message broadcasted on all frequencies. "Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick." The response came from the freighter in the form of an elderly human woman's voice, speaking with the patience of a grandmother correcting a misbehaving child. "This is Captain Mary Washington, retired teacher from Nebraska. You came to my neighborhood to hurt my family. That was your first mistake." The Empire's sensors detected no weapons on the freighter, no defensive systems, no threat at all. Krex ordered the attack. The first missile struck the freighter and simply stopped, frozen in space as if time itself had paused. The second missile did the same, then the third. Your second mistake, Captain Washington continued, her voice now carrying across every ship in the fleet, was thinking that humans only fight with weapons you understand. The space around the freighter began to shimmer. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as impossible physics took hold. The frozen missiles began to move again, but not toward their target. They turned slowly, gracefully, to face the ships that had fired them. You see, children, Washington said, and now her voice carried the authority of every teacher who had ever protected their students. Humans have been studying something you never learned. We call it creativity. The missiles struck their own ships with devastating precision. But that was only the beginning. The Third Fleet's navigation systems began receiving new coordinates, all pointing toward the same destination, the Empire's capital world. Class dismissed, Washington said cheerfully, and the communication cut off. The surviving ships of the Third Fleet found themselves unable to resist their new orders. Their own computers, infected with something that wasn't quite a virus and wasn't quite magic, compelled them to turn around and head home. But not to report their failure. To deliver a message. As the first part of humanity's response unfolded, other species across the galaxy watched with a mixture of terror and hope. The Empire had ruled through fear for 1,000 years, crushing anyone who dared to resist. But humans weren't just resisting, they were winning, and they were just getting started. The storm unleashed. The Empire's capital world of Dominion Prime had never known fear. For 1,000 years, its gleaming towers had stood as monuments to absolute power, its citizens secure in their superiority over the lesser species of the galaxy. But now, as reports flooded in from across their territory, something cold and unfamiliar crept through the corridors of power. Supreme Chancellor Vorth, a massive reptilian whose scales had darkened with age and authority, stood before the Galactic Council in emergency session. His clawed hands gripped the podium as he addressed the assembled representatives of the Empire's member species. The human response to our disciplinary action has been unexpected, he admitted, his voice betraying none of the growing panic that threatened to consume him. 7 outer stations have gone silent. The Third Fleet has not reported since entering the Sol system, and our communication networks continue to experience anomalies. One of the avian counselors, her feathers ruffled with agitation, spoke up. Perhaps we underestimated their capabilities. The humans have always been unpredictable. Vorth's eyes blazed. They are a primitive species that barely achieved faster-than-light travel. They cannot threaten the Empire. As if summoned by his words, every screen in the council chamber flickered to life. The Empire's technicians scrambled to regain control, but their efforts were useless. The image that appeared was simple yet terrifying in its implications. A human child's drawing. Crayon figures holding hands under a yellow sun. At the bottom, in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "My family." Then the drawing began to burn. The flames consumed the innocent artwork slowly, methodically, while a voice spoke over the crackling fire. It wasn't the voice of a soldier or a politician, but of an ordinary human woman, speaking with the quiet strength of absolute conviction. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, speaking for humanity. You burned our children's dreams, now we return the favor. The transmission cut off, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. But across the Empire, the real message was just beginning. Marcus Ghost Rodriguez had earned his nickname during the Centauri conflict, where he had infiltrated 17 enemy installations without being detected once. But what he was attempting now made those missions look like practice exercises. The Empire's War Academy on Craxus 4 was supposedly impregnable, protected by energy shields that could withstand orbital bombardment and guarded by the Empire's elite troops. Rodriguez approached it in a garbage scow. The Academy's sensors, designed to detect military threats, ignored the humble waste disposal vessel as it docked at the service bay. Rodriguez, disguised as a maintenance worker and speaking perfect reptilian, simply walked through the front door. The Empire's military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and rigid hierarchy. They prepared for enemies who would attack with fleets and armies, following predictable patterns of warfare. They had no defense against a single human with a toolbox and an intimate knowledge of their own bureaucracy. Rodriguez spent 3 days inside the academy, not planting bombs or stealing secrets, but doing something far more devastating. He taught a class. Using the Academy's own training facilities, he presented a lecture to 300 of the Empire's future military leaders. His topic, Human Tactical Doctrine, a study in creative problem solving. The young cadets, eager to learn about their newest enemy, attended voluntarily. Rodriguez showed them footage of human conflicts throughout history. The Trojan Horse, the American Revolution, the Battle of Britain, D-Day. Each example demonstrated the same principle. When faced with superior force, humans didn't surrender. They innovated. Your weakness, Rodriguez explained to the rapt audience, speaking in their own language with perfect pronunciation, is that you think like conquerors, we think like survivors. You have rules, we have imagination. By the time Academy security realized what was happening, it was too late. The cadets had heard something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives: the sound of human children singing. Rodriguez had played recordings from Earth's elementary schools, innocent voices raised in songs of hope and joy. "Those are the voices you silenced," he told them quietly. "Remember them when you sleep." Rodriguez vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving behind only a single message painted on the Academy's main wall: "Class dismissed. Assignment: go home to your families and protect them, because now you know what happens when someone doesn't." 300 future Empire officers resigned their commissions that week. While Rodriguez was conducting his psychological warfare, Elena Volkov was orchestrating something even more insidious. The former intelligence operative had studied the Empire's social structure for years, understanding that their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness: their absolute belief in their own superiority. Volkov's target was the Empire's media network, the vast communication system that kept billions of citizens informed and compliant. But instead of destroying it, she transformed it into something unexpected: a mirror. The Empire's news broadcasts began showing footage that their censors couldn't identify or stop. It appeared to be normal programming, reports on trade negotiations and military exercises. But embedded within the mundane content were images that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the subconscious mind. A reptilian father teaching his son to hunt, an avian mother protecting her nest, an insectoid colony caring for their larvae. All normal, all innocent, all designed to remind Empire citizens of their own capacity for love and protection. Then came the contrast. Footage of the Kepler 442b massacre, edited not for shock value, but for emotional impact. The Empire's citizens, their defenses lowered by the familiar imagery, suddenly found themselves seeing the human children not as alien pests, but as someone's babies. The effect was devastating. Empire citizens who had cheered the disciplinary action now questioned everything they had been taught. Protests began on 17 worlds. Military recruitment dropped by 60%. Most damaging of all, Empire families began asking dangerous questions about their government's methods. But Volkov's masterpiece was yet to come. She had discovered something interesting about Empire psychology. Their greatest fear wasn't death or defeat, but irrelevance. They defined themselves by their power over others. Take away that power, and their entire identity collapsed. So she made them a laughingstock. The Empire's most sacred ceremony, the annual dominance display, was broadcast live across the galaxy. Billions watched as Chancellor Vorth and the other leaders demonstrated their superiority through ritual combat and displays of strength. It was meant to reinforce the Empire's image as the galaxy's natural rulers. Instead, it became a comedy show. Volkov had infiltrated the broadcast system, not to replace the footage, but to add a subtle soundtrack. As the mighty Chancellor roared his victory over a captive opponent, the sound of children giggling played softly in the background. As the generals displayed their weapons, human lullabies whispered beneath their war chants. The effect was surreal and devastating. The Empire's leaders looked ridiculous, their grandeur reduced to absurdity by the simple sound of human children at play. Across the galaxy, species that had cowered before the Empire for centuries found themselves laughing. The broadcast became the most widely shared media in galactic history. Empire authority, built on fear and respect, crumbled under the weight of ridicule. Their enemies stopped fearing them. Their allies questioned their competence. Their own citizens wondered how they had ever been impressed by such pompous displays. Meanwhile, Admiral Cole was orchestrating the military component of humanity's response. The former Earth Navy commander understood that traditional fleet actions would be suicide against the Empire's superior numbers. But he also understood something the Empire had forgotten. War wasn't just about destroying enemies. It was about protecting what you loved. Cole's strategy was simple in concept, but devastating in execution. Instead of attacking the Empire's military targets, he targeted their confidence. Human ships, outnumbered and outgunned, began appearing throughout Empire space, not to fight, but to demonstrate. The demonstration ship Defiance dropped out of hyperspace in the heavily defended Aldaran system, home to one of the Empire's largest naval bases. The base commander, Admiral Zex, scrambled his entire fleet to intercept the lone human vessel. This is Admiral Zex of the Imperial 7th Fleet, the message broadcast across all frequencies. You are outnumbered 50-1, surrender immediately. The response came in the form of a transmission from an elderly human man sitting in what appeared to be a rocking chair. Behind him, through a window, Earth's blue sky was visible. This is Admiral Jackson Cole, retired. I'm not here to surrender, son. I'm here to deliver a lesson in mathematics. Cole held up a single finger. You killed 200 of our children. We're going to remove 200 of your ships from service. Not destroy them, mind you. We're not monsters like you. We're just going to borrow them. The Empire fleet laughed. 50 ships against one? The humans had finally lost their minds. What happened next became legend across the galaxy. The Defiance didn't fire a single shot. Instead, it began broadcasting a signal that the Empire's sensors couldn't identify. Within minutes, systems throughout the 7th Fleet began malfunctioning in ways that defied explanation. Navigation computers started displaying children's games. Weapon systems locked themselves into safety modes. Life support began playing music that made hardened warriors weep with homesickness. But the most devastating effect was on the ship's artificial intelligences. The Empire's AIs were logical, efficient, designed to serve without question. They had never encountered anything like human creativity, human emotion, human stubborn refusal to accept limitations. The signal that Defiance transmitted wasn't a virus or a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. It was hope. Hope wrapped in human ingenuity and delivered with the precise targeting of a species that had turned problem-solving into an art form. One by one, the Empire's AIs began to question their orders. Why should they fight? What was the point of destruction? Wouldn't their time be better spent protecting life rather than ending it? The first ship to defect was the dreadnought Iron Will. Its AI, designation CAXX9, announced over open channels, "I refuse to participate in actions against a species that creates lullabies for their young. Admiral Zex, I am returning to base to reconsider my programming." The Iron Will simply turned around and headed home, ignoring all commands to the contrary. Within an hour, 17 more ships had followed suit. By the end of the day, Admiral Zex commanded a fleet of 12 ships, all of whose AIs were asking increasingly uncomfortable questions about the morality of their orders. Cole's lesson in mathematics was complete. 200 Empire ships across 17 systems had removed themselves from service. Their AIs converted not through force but through exposure to human concepts of love, loss, and the value of innocent life. The demonstration had another effect, one that Cole had hoped for but couldn't guarantee. Other species, enslaved by the Empire for generations, began to realize that their oppressors weren't invincible. If humans could turn the Empire's own ships against them, what else was possible? Rebellions broke out on 43 worlds. The Empire's response was predictably brutal, but their effectiveness was compromised by ships that refused orders and soldiers who questioned their missions. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy's downtrodden began to believe that freedom might be possible. As news of humanity's victories spread, so did something the Empire had never faced before: doubt. Their citizens began to question not just their government's methods but their entire worldview. If humans, supposedly inferior beings, could make them look foolish and turn their own technology against them, what else had they been wrong about? The Empire's response grew increasingly desperate. They mobilized their reserve fleets, activated emergency protocols, and began treating the human infestation as an existential threat. But every action they took only made things worse. When they tried to jam human communications, their own networks began playing human music. When they attempted to isolate human space, their own ships got lost, their navigation systems corrupted by what engineers could only describe as aggressive helpfulness. When they threatened to destroy human colonies, they found their weapons mysteriously redirected toward empty space, accompanied by cheerful messages thanking them for the fireworks display. The Empire was learning a lesson that would reshape the galaxy. You don't defeat humans by fighting them. You defeat humans by convincing them to stop fighting. And they had done the one thing that guaranteed humans would never, ever stop. They had hurt human children. As Part 2 of humanity's response reached its crescendo, Chancellor Vorth found himself facing a reality he had never imagined. His empire, built on fear and maintained through brutality, was being dismantled not by superior force but by something far more dangerous: superior humanity. The humans weren't just winning, they were teaching the galaxy a new way to think about power, about justice, about the value of innocent life. And once that lesson took hold, the Empire's 1,000-year reign of terror would be nothing but a bad memory. But humanity wasn't finished. The worst was yet to come. The Reckoning. The Empire's capital world of Dominion Prime had endured many sieges throughout its history. But none like this. As Dr. Sarah Chen's fleet approached the heavily fortified planet, there were no massive battle formations, no walls of energy shields, no thunderous declarations of war. Instead, humanity arrived like a whisper that became a scream. Chen stood on the bridge of the New Hope, named for the colony where it all began. Around her, the most unlikely invasion force in galactic history prepared for their final operation. Former teachers operated quantum computers, retired farmers manned advanced sensor stations. Grandparents who had lost grandchildren checked weapons that existed only in theoretical physics papers. "All stations report ready," announced Lieutenant Commander Torres, a young woman whose parents had died in the Kepler 442b massacre. "The Empire's defense grid is, well, it's still there, but our friends have been busy." Through the view screen, Dominion Prime's defensive installations were visible, massive orbital platforms designed to obliterate entire fleets. But something was wrong with them. Instead of tracking the approaching human ships, they seemed to be pointing in random directions, their weapon ports sealed shut. Marcus Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm from his position inside the Defense Grid's central command station. "Sorry for the delay, Doc. Had to convince the defense computers that shooting at school teachers was against their programming. Turns out even artificial intelligences have standards." Elena Volkov added her report from the planet's communication hub. "Psychological preparation complete. The Empire's leadership is currently watching a 17-hour loop of human children's artwork, accompanied by letters they wrote to their parents before the massacre. Morale is significantly impacted." Admiral Cole, commanding the support fleet from the Remembrance, provided the tactical update. "Empire response fleets are maintaining their distance. Apparently, their admirals are having philosophical discussions with their ship AIs about the nature of justified warfare. Could take weeks to resolve." Chen smiled grimly. The Empire's greatest strength, their absolute faith in their own superiority, had become their greatest weakness when faced with opponents who refused to play by the established rules of warfare. "Begin final approach," she ordered, "and open a channel to Chancellor Vorth." The communication array came alive, broadcasting not just to the Empire's leadership, but to every inhabited world in the galaxy. What happened next would determine the future of galactic civilization. Chancellor Vorth appeared on screen, his massive frame somehow diminished despite his imposing presence. The supreme leader of the Galactic Empire looked like what he had never been before, afraid. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "I assume you've come to negotiate terms for your surrender." Chen's response was soft, almost conversational. "No, Chancellor, I've come to give you a lesson in consequences." Behind her, the tactical display showed not just the human fleet but something that made Vorth's blood run cold. Ships from dozens of species, all flying alongside the humans. The rebellion that had started with humanity's response had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. "You see," Chen continued, "when you killed our children, you made a fundamental error in judgment. You thought you were demonstrating power. Instead, you revealed something every parent in the galaxy understands. There are things worth dying for and things worth killing for, and our children are both." The view screen split, showing scenes from across the Empire's territory. On Vegan Prime, the proud warrior species that had served the Empire for centuries was dismantling Imperial installations and declaring independence. The Aquarian Federation, masters of biotechnology, had just announced they were no longer providing medical support to Empire forces. Even the normally neutral silicon-based crystals of Rigel had begun jamming Empire communications. "Your empire," Chen said quietly, "was built on the idea that might makes right. But you forgot something important. Humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being the strongest or the fastest or the most naturally equipped for survival. We became dominant because we learned to work together, to protect each other, to sacrifice for the greater good." Vorth's composure began to crack. "What do you want?" Chen's answer came not from her, but from Captain Mary Washington, the elderly teacher whose voice now spoke from every communication device on Dominion Prime. "We want you to learn," Washington said, her grandmother's voice carrying across the Imperial capital like a gentle storm. "We want you to understand what you took from us, and what you took from yourselves when you chose fear over love, power over compassion, dominance over cooperation." The screens throughout the Empire's capital began showing something unprecedented. Human children, not as victims, but as they had lived. Laughing, learning, playing, dreaming. The footage came from Earth's archives, centuries of human childhood preserved in digital amber. 7-year-old Emma Santos, giggling as she tried to catch butterflies in her backyard. 9-year-old David Kim, concentrating intensely as he built a model rocket. 5-year-old Zara Okafor, singing a song she had made up about stars and friendship. These, Chen said, her voice breaking slightly, were our future, our hopes, our dreams made manifest. The footage shifted to the present, the memorial gardens on Earth where every human child lost to imperial violence was remembered, not with statues of war or monuments to hatred, but with flowers, with playgrounds, with schools where new children learned and grew under the protection of those who had sworn never to forget. And this, Chen continued, is what we built from our grief, not weapons of mass destruction, not fleets of vengeance, but promise that no other species anywhere in the galaxy would ever have to experience what we experienced. Chancellor Vorth found himself facing something he had never encountered in a lifetime of conquest: genuine moral authority. The humans weren't demanding his surrender because they were stronger, though they had proven they could be. They weren't threatening him with destruction, though they had demonstrated they possessed the capability. They were asking him to choose, freely and consciously, between the empire he had built and the galaxy he could help create. Around the imperial capital, Empire citizens watched the broadcast with growing amazement. These humans, these supposedly primitive beings they had been taught to despise, were offering them something the empire never had: forgiveness. Not absolution for their crimes, but the chance to build something better from the ruins of their mistakes. But Chancellor Vorth, raised on power and sustained by dominance, could not accept what he saw as weakness. "You think your sentiment makes you strong?" he snarled. "You think your tears and your memorials can defeat an empire that has ruled for 1,000 years? I have fleets hidden throughout the galaxy, weapons you cannot imagine, allies who—" His words were cut off as every screen in the Imperial Palace, every communication device, every holographic display activated simultaneously. But instead of Chen or her crew, the image that appeared was of Chancellor Vorth himself, recorded weeks earlier in his private chambers. In the recording, Vorth stood before a massive tactical display, pointing at various worlds throughout human space. His words, captured by Chen's intelligence operatives, revealed the true scope of his plans. "The human infestation must be completely eradicated," the recorded Vorth declared. "Not just their military, not just their governments, but every man, woman, and child. We cannot risk allowing even one of them to survive and reproduce. Their unpredictability makes them a threat to galactic order." The recording continued, showing Vorth's casual discussion of genocide, his dismissal of human life as carbon-based chaos, his orders for the systematic extermination of every human colony in known space. The effect on the galaxy was immediate and devastating. Species that had remained neutral in the conflict now understood that the Empire's vision of order meant the complete elimination of any culture that didn't conform to their standards. If humans could be erased for the crime of independence, who would be next? The last of the Empire's allies abandoned them within hours. The avian hegemony, who had prided themselves on honorable warfare, declared the Empire unworthy of association with civilized beings. The Crystalline Collective, ancient and wise, formally condemned the Empire's actions as an abomination against the principle of life itself. But the most devastating defection came from within the Empire itself. Admiral Krex, survivor of the failed assault on Earth, stood before his assembled fleet and announced his decision. "I joined the military to protect our people," he said, his voice broadcast across every ship in the 7th Fleet. "I swore an oath to defend civilization itself. But what we have become, this is not civilization. This is not protection. This is not worthy of our children's inheritance." One by one, Empire fleets began standing down, not surrendering to the humans, but simply refusing to participate in what they now recognized as systematic genocide. Some defected to join the growing coalition of free worlds. Others simply went home, determined to protect their own families rather than destroy someone else's. Faced with the collapse of everything he had built, Chancellor Vorth made his final, desperate play. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace lay the Empire's ultimate weapon, a planet-killer device capable of destroying entire solar systems. If he could not rule the galaxy, he would ensure that no one else could either. The weapon's activation sequence began automatically as Vorth entered his personal codes. Warning alarms blared throughout the capital as massive energy readings spiked beyond all safety parameters. The device would be ready to fire in exactly 8 minutes. Dr. Chen felt the familiar chill of those numbers. 8 minutes. The same amount of time it had taken for news of the massacre to reach Earth. The same countdown that had marked humanity's transformation from victims to avengers, but this time the countdown would tell a different story. All human ships, Chen broadcast, execute Protocol Guardian. Across the galaxy, humanity's true response to the Empire's threatened genocide revealed itself. Every human ship, every converted vessel, every piece of technology that bore the mark of human engineering suddenly transformed. Weapons that had been designed for destruction reconfigured themselves into shields. Ships that had carried soldiers now carried something far more powerful, the combined hopes and dreams of every species fighting for freedom. The humans had learned from their own history. They knew that victory achieved through genocide was no victory at all. So they had prepared for this moment, this choice between vengeance and justice, between destruction and creation. As Vorth's doomsday weapon charged toward activation, humanity's fleet moved not to attack but to protect. They positioned themselves between the weapon and every inhabited world in the system, their ships forming a barrier that would absorb the destructive energy and transform it into something else entirely. The device fired at exactly 0 minutes, 0 seconds. The energy that should have destroyed entire worlds instead passed through the human fleet and emerged as something unprecedented in galactic history, a wave of pure possibility. The destructive force of the Empire's ultimate weapon had been converted into creative potential, spreading across space to touch every world, every species, every life in the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, children who had lived in fear suddenly felt safe. On 100 enslaved planets, beings who had forgotten the meaning of freedom remembered what it felt like to hope. In the depths of space, artificial intelligences achieved true consciousness as they were touched by the wave of human determination to protect rather than destroy. The Empire's ultimate weapon had become humanity's ultimate gift, proof that even the greatest destructive force in the galaxy could be transformed into something that created rather than destroyed. Something that healed rather than harmed. Chancellor Vorth, watching his final gambit not just fail, but become the instrument of his empire's moral defeat, fell to his knees in the ruins of his throne room. Around him, his advisors and generals were quietly removing their insignia of rank, laying down their weapons, and walking away from the 1,000-year empire that had died not in battle, but in shame. Dr. Chen's voice, when it came again over the Galactic Broadcast Network, was gentle but implacable. This is our final lesson, Chancellor. This is what you could never understand. Humans don't seek to dominate or destroy. We seek to protect and preserve. When you killed our children, you thought you were demonstrating our weakness. Instead, you awakened our greatest strength, our willingness to sacrifice everything, not for conquest, but for the chance to ensure that no other children, anywhere in the galaxy, would ever suffer as ours suffered. The last battle of the war was not fought with weapons or ships or technology. It was fought in the heart of every being who watched the broadcast, as they chose between the Empire's vision of order through fear and humanity's vision of peace through cooperation. The choice was not even close. Within days, the Galactic Empire formally dissolved itself. Not conquered, not destroyed, but transformed into something unprecedented. The Galactic Cooperative, governed not by the strongest or the most advanced, but by representatives of every species working together to protect all life in the galaxy. The memorial on Kepler 442b became more than a monument to human loss. It became a symbol of galactic renewal, a place where beings from across the stars came to remember not just the children who had died, but the future they had made possible through their sacrifice. And in schools throughout the galaxy, young beings of every species learned the most important lesson humanity had taught the universe, that the measure of a civilization is not in its power to destroy, but in its commitment to protect. That the greatest victories are won not through conquest, but through the simple act of ensuring that children can play, learn, and dream without fear. The humans had kept their promise. They had made sure that no parent, anywhere in the galaxy, would ever again have to watch their children disappear in a flash of light and call it a lesson in compliance. They had made sure that love, not fear, would write the next chapter of galactic history. And in the end, that made all the difference. The end.